Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise news analyst Emmanuel Malabite Efeni. Good morning.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning, Rufa.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Victoria. Tundu MK Abiola.
Good morning.
Yes, the Amoteku Camisole with a black jacket. Yes, daughter of Yoruba land.
Daughter of the West.
Okay.
It's a very
Yes.
turn it into a Mojaku color.
Now let's start the review with this day, Nigeria's newspaper of records. The lead story, World Bank. Rising prices push 7 million Nigerians below poverty line. Says reforms needed to reduce inflation, accelerate recovery. Blames lack of economic opportunities for insecurity, criminality in Nigeria. Moderation in food prices slows inflation to 17.93%. Other newspapers, of course, most of the newspapers on my table this morning have this World Bank report, which was just published in the Nigeria Development Update of the World Bank. They're having the same story from the Guardian newspaper. Rising prices weaken disposable incomes despite easing inflation. Inflation in May stood at 17.93%, still among the highest in 4 years. Inflation pushed 7 million Nigerians into poverty in 2020, says World Bank. Critical reforms needed to reduce inflation, accelerate recovery. Federal government urged to liberalize NAFEX window, remove fuel subsidy totally. Now, the Vanguard newspaper has this story also. Rise in prices sent 7 million more Nigerians into poverty, the World Bank. But there are other stories on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Anti-open grazing laws about people, not governors. Umahi says no land for ranching in Southeast. Stop peddling fake news about security situation in Southeast. Some leaders, elites, lack patriotism. That's Umahi saying. Now, another story, and that below that, how monarchs, elites, aid herdsmen atrocities, Ekiti farmers. Now, the Daily Trust newspaper, World Bank counters federal government, says 7 million Nigerians plunge into poverty. Falls Central Bank of Nigeria on forex crisis. We can't afford food, basic needs. Citizens. Presidency insists 10 million people lifted out of poverty. Inflation drops by 0.19% in May. NBS. Tackle issues causing inflation. But there's another story in front page of the Trust newspapers. How governors ruin our democracy. Narba, that's Gali Umar Narba, former Speaker of the House of Representatives. And if you look at that story quickly, he's making a point which I think we should not just pass by like that. Now, he says, the governors have drawn a line in politics in which if you are not their boy, you won't become anybody or get elected at all levels. This is happening in both the PDP and the APC. Ruben, you're a part-time politician. You should know more about this. But I think any observer of our politics will know that there is so much truth in what Gali Naba has said. Once a governor finds his way to power, he wants to be the godfather of everybody. He wants to decide who becomes the next chairman in my local government, in your local government, and of course, he wants to install his successor. Perhaps we the people, will need to be more vigilant and more assertive, because a governor cannot be the lord of the manor. Haven't been elected, we should have the opportunity to elect those we prefer, not the governor using his incumbency factor to fill all positions within the polity. Now, if we look at the Daily Independent newspaper, the same lead story, Nigeria needs reform to curb inflation, support recovery, World Bank. But if we just take one story from the front page there, crisis rocks ABGA as Okeke Oye claim chairmanship position. Okeke fixes July 1 for Anambra Goba primaries. Oye says it's June 23. ABGA, of course, if they are at each other's throats when it comes to Anambra election, we know why. That is the only state ABGA has been able to sustain in this democratic dispensation. So that is their oil block, if you will, and they are ready to kill or stab one another to ensure that they have the stakeholders in ABGA. I hope they will do all they have to do in an atmosphere of peace in order not to worsen the security situation already in the southeast. Now, the Nigerian Tribune newspaper, no gazette establishing grazing routes in Nigeria or Padukun, while the Nation newspaper, no, the Punch newspaper now, no, the Nation before the Punch, of course, the lead story, inflation, crippling economy, increasing poverty, says experts. The Punch newspaper, quickly, the Punch, yes, military bombards bandits in northwest, north central forest. NAF, that's the Nigerian Air Force bombs, killed 500 cows, 200 missing in Nasarawa, alleges Meiti Allah. Reports of 1,000 cows killed unrealistic. Nigerian Air Force troops comb Katsina forest. But I think this story should be investigated because the Meiti Allah, they are alleging that the Nigerian Air Force bomb killed over 500 cows and persons who are not necessarily bandits. It's not enough to just brush this report aside by the Nigerian Air Force authorities. It should be properly investigated so that if there are errors, you don't repeat such errors. We cannot just brush away that stuff. Now, the foreign newspapers, quickly. The Times of UK, mandatory COVID jabs for NHS and care home workers. Yes, Boris Johnson is going to back the plan to legally enforce vaccination despite human rights warnings. And of course, the government is open to consultation on this as a condition, that is, vaccination as a condition for employment in the health worker services. And it is in an attempt to reduce transmission in hospitals and save lives. I think nobody can quarrel with that. But of course, as always, there are human rights concerns. But the health of health workers and those who visit hospitals and care homes should also be protected. Now, the Daily Telegraph newspaper of UK, no green light to start vaccinating children. Of course, ministers will advise against mass rollout of COVID vaccinations based on the advice of experts on the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Transmission. And they are expected to make that recommendation that against vaccinating under 18th in the immediate future, because according to these experts, they don't have enough data yet to make that call. So for now, vaccination of under 18s will be kept in abeyance. Now, the New York Times newspaper, momentous. New York and California open. Nation approaching 600,000 deaths despite progress, lifting most limits on businesses and social events. Of course, New York State and the state of California, two of the states earliest and hardest hit by the pandemic, and they announced yesterday, triumphantly, as the New York Times is reporting, that they had lifted virtually all restrictions. And of course, this in itself is based on the fact that they have made milestone progress when it comes to vaccination. New York has been able to vaccinate over 70% of its adults, at least with one jab. Ruben Rufai and Tundu.
I think in all of this, as the world starts to open up back from COVID, I think at this point, let's just spare a thought for people that have died as a result of this. We're on earth because we're privileged, that we didn't get the ravaging effects of COVID. Some people were not that privileged. They were not that lucky. They lost their lives. You know, I don't know what to say, but some deaths come one too many. And for the over 600,000 people that died in America, over 2,000 people that died here in Nigeria, over 3 million people, you know, that have died around the world, or 3.7 million and counting that are still dying from COVID. You know, I just think we should spare thought for them at this time, because it could have been us they're talking about like that today. But I just feel we're lucky to be here.
Well, the statements made by the World Bank, both in the report, the Nigeria Development Update, and also the interviews granted by the country director and another representative of the World Bank on Arise TV. I hope, you know, the relevant authorities in Nigeria will take a look at some of those critical points that have been made. One critical point would seem to be the conclusion in that report that 7 million people were thrown into poverty, extreme poverty, in the year 2020 alone. That clearly is different from what the president said in his June 12 Democracy Day address, when he said 10.5 million people have been lifted out of poverty in 2 years. And this is a problem that we have in terms of, you know, planning without correct data in Nigeria. There is a multiplicity of sources in terms of data in Nigeria. The NBS quotes a set of data. International agencies quote another set of data, creating confusion. But what is clear, of course, is that despite the fact that in the National Bureau of Statistics report yesterday, that in April there was a deceleration of inflation, headline inflation and food inflation, and again in May. The reality on the streets of Nigeria is simply in line with that World Bank declaration.
They had evidence on the streets.
Yes, the evidence of our eyes, the irredoubtable evidence of what we see on a daily basis, you know, is simply that there's still a lot of hardship. And if you look at food inflation, the areas most affected, they are basic foods, bread, cereals, you know, rice, things that ordinary people depend upon. And there's no indication that the unemployment rate has gone down. And so instead of saying, well, the World Bank doesn't know what it is talking about, which is standard practice around here, I think it's important to look at those details. That World Bank update is not saying anything extraordinary. They've been consistent with regard to removal of subsidy, with the unification of the exchange rate, with reform, with cost-reflective, service-reflective electricity tariffs. That has been the position of the Bretton Woods institutions. But on a positive side, it was admitted that some reforms have been carried out. But there is a caveat, that those reforms have to be sustained. Those reforms have to go government to government. In other words, the big takeaway for me is that the economy is a big thing. Economy, 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 prosperity, growth for the people of Nigeria.
Well, very quickly, Gali Naba's take as governors being a clog in the wheel of democracy, it actually starts from elections. You'll recall Donald Duke's expose, I think 10 years ago, about how governors are complicit in rigging elections, generally speaking, of course. So it's actually really damning, and I don't think anybody should just dismiss these allegations. They should be addressed. Well, I guess we've run out of time. Thank you, Mr. Feni.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.